All right, hey, how's it doing? So I figured the live stream would be the easiest way for me to do this, and unfortunately, it's the lighting's a little bit dark, but that's all right. Okay, so I'm gonna try to look at the camera here. So this concept is a very complex concept, but it's one that I feel that it's never been shared before out there, and it's a really, really interesting insight into the true self. So as you know, I've talked about the true self before, but that true self is on one level. That's the self that reincarnates over and over again. Now I need to kind of like just go over briefly some of the concepts that I've gone over before so that this video makes sense. Otherwise, it's gonna be like, what is he talking about? And even then, it might be like, what is he talking about? Because this concept is a deep concept. I'm gonna try to make it as simple as possible so that it's not overbearingly, just complex. Anyway, so first thing is you want to think about the idea of how reincarnation works. So reincarnation, from my memory and when I remember about my own reincarnation and other people's reincarnation, and being able to meditate and go into what people call the Akashic records, the eternal information that all of the universe is basically a what's the best word? An emanation of. Your true self starts off as something like a rat-like creature. Some of you were originated on planet Earth, others originated on different planets. And either way, we all start off as this very primitive type creature, a creature, though, that is intelligent enough to learn. That means to learn knowledge and then apply knowledge in a new situation. That's like what intelligence is. So a tree doesn't have this evolutionary reincarnation. They reincarnate, but they only come back as like other plants. Bugs come back as other bugs. But something that is intelligent enough to actually learn from its mistakes and grow and change and become more intelligent, that is, they're able to evolve their intelligence, they're able to figure out simple puzzles like a rat can, like a crow can. Those things, they evolve in their reincarnation. So they don't just keep staying stagnant, coming back as the same stuff over and over again. And believe me, the trees don't mind because they don't have, the understanding that they're what they're doing, right? They don't ever evolve past them and get more intelligent because they can't learn. But something of rat like intelligence can learn. All right, so how does that work? So if you start out like this rat-like creature, and then you grow into, after you live enough of that, I'm not saying a rat necessarily, it could be a crow, it could, on another planet, it could be some other creature that looks totally different than anything you imagine. But you start off as that creature, and at each life you get more intelligent, more intelligent, more intelligent. Eventually you outgrow that form, and your physical form, if you want to call it physical, your consciousness evolves to where now it's interfacing with more complicated life forms. Now, whatever planet you originate on, you don't necessarily stay on that planet, but you do stay on that planet for quite a while. But if there's not a life form for you to move into, then you're going to go to a different universe, not different universe, sorry, a different world, a different planet, where there is a life form to accommodate your intelligence level. Because let's say there's a big missing gap on the evolutionary of that one. So anyway, basically you go through your own evolutionary tree, so to speak, starting off this very primitive creature, beginning more advanced, more advanced. If I were to put it in a very simple term really quickly using earth creatures, rat, cat, dog, let's say lemur, let's say octopus, dolphin, chimpanzee, human, something like that, right? That'd be like just on Earth, like that could be one mode. That's like skipping a lot of in betweens. But you go through this evolutionary process as you reincarnate, and as you outgrow each form, you change, you interface with more and more complex things until you're interfacing with what we are now, humanoid forms, not just humanoids on Earth, but on other planets as well. That doesn't mean that every person right now that's a humanoid on Earth has necessarily been reincarnated on other planets, though. And that answers that question of, well, if reincarnation is true and there's like 7 billion people now, there used to only be like a few million people, where did did new souls come out, all that kind of stuff? And so the basic idea is, yeah, new souls are always happening if you want to call them souls. New true selves are always coming into existence as a low life creature, something of rat-like intelligence or crow-like intelligence, and they grow and so there's always more lives throughout the planet or planets throughout the universe. So keep that in mind. There are billions and billions of planets with life on them throughout our universe. It's huge. It's gigantic. And each of those, some of them, well, not each of them, but some of them have life on them that are evolving and changing. And so the soul, if you want to call it that, reincarnates, to whatever planet has the necessary life form for its stage of evolution. And so, yeah, naturally, you would expect that certain planets would grow more, like have a population growth in humanoids because there's a high demand for humanoids. And because that as a lot of souls are reaching that state of their evolutionary period, and therefore they have to go to a planet and the population growth happens. So, our own evolution through reincarnation actually can influence a planet's evolution, right? A spontaneous growth of humanoids, for example, on Earth. And that is necessary because, if there's not enough room throughout the universe or localized area, because sometimes you can only reincarnate. Anyway, that gets all complicated. Anyway, so that's the basic idea of reincarnation and how it works and within Namicism. Okay, so next. And this might not be your understanding. Through Namicism, through meditation, you come to your own conclusions. I'm just sharing my conclusions, what I remember, and hopefully it'll help other people to start to awaken and to see their self. Now, one thing that's always bothered me is the question of, okay, within this process, how long has it been happening for? Well, it's been happening forever, right? Because there can't be a beginning point, right, to this. And that gets complicated in philosophy and stuff, but basically you can't have an infinite regress. So in order for eternity to work, like you need cycles. I'm like, that sucks because that means that we cycle too. So eventually we go out of existence and we come back. What I've remembered for a long time is that there's a unique core personality that makes you you. And I'm going to go into that concept first before we get into what's the ultimate you. So within the infinite information or eternal information, don't know if it's infinite, but it might as well be. Within this information, the sea of information, right? That's static information. What I call God is the dynamic information. That's information that's moving, interacting, interfacing, feedbacking with the static information. That's the information that causes our consciousness to come into existence. And so it doesn't think, it doesn't feel, doesn't see, doesn't hear. It's if you wanted to liken God unto something, it'd be like an eternal supercomputer, right? It works, it self-corrects, it self-processes. I know these are kind of like big words. So self-correct just means it constantly is correcting anything that might ever occur that is error in the code. It is self-preserving. So that is, it constantly preserves everything to make sure that it functions properly. So we don't have like a freeze on reality. And then it also, so self-preservation, self-correcting, self-processing, meaning that it is constantly processing information, so to speak, to emanate the 3D universe that we experience, the holographic universe that we experience. And that is also constantly processing dynamic information to take that core. I'm going to show you why are we conscious beings? That's a whole different topic, but I'll go into it briefly. I need to really do a whole different writing or video on that. But so that also is what processes our unique personality so that we can make choices and interface with a body within this universe. So basically, B theory of time is correct that every event that could ever happen happens, is happening, is always. So every life you could ever lived is already out there in the information. So you can actually search the information and find all these lives. The problem is every also probable life you could have lived exists there. Now it exists in a static way, right? So it exists as information. You don't actually exist like, okay, right now, let's say it's possible for you to be the president. You could have made certain choices this life to where right now you'd be the president, but you didn't make those choices. Those choices exist within the information, but you don't actually exist as a president. Now, this is a different concept. It's not parallel universes where there's one you that exists right now as a president, like Rick and Morty, parallel universes. Like there's the many Ricks, many Mortys, awesome show, by the way. Not like that. Rather, there's another possible you, but it doesn't actually exist. It's a non-thinking thing. It exists only in that sea of information. So every choice you can make in this life and every other life exists within that information, but you only make one choice. So let me go and show you something really quick. So it's like this. Let's say you start this diagram here. This is your beginning point on this life. Now you could have gone so many different ways, but you went this way. And then you could have gone so many different ways, but you went this way, so forth. Here, you could have gone this way or this way, but you went this way. If you went this way, down this branch, this is the branch that if you made the right choices, you could have became president. All this information where you could have became president exists within that sea of information, but it doesn't exist as an actual person. You only exist where you're going down. So all these are eternal points of existence. So every one of those branches that you could take exists as information. And that information is projected in this 3D universe, and it's presented to you as a conscious entity. And as you flow through these slices of space-time, right, as you flow through these slices of space-time, that's you making choices. That's why you actually have free will, because you are choosing which eternal paths to experience. And so every time you make a choice, which is every nanosecond, Planck second, that you're making these little choices, even a little choice to do this versus doing this, those are two different timelines that exist within that sea of information. And so imagine that there is a type of multiverse out there, but of a bunch of frozen U's, and you are just flowing through those different frozen U's depending on what path you take. And those frozen U's don't think. Why? Because they're frozen. They're static. They're static pieces of information that don't do anything. They don't think. But when you experience and flow through it, you gain those new knowledge, new information. This is another big topic. Get into that later. But anyway, so this is one path this path you took, this is where you end up. You could have taken so many different other paths, but this is the path that you chose with your own will, your will of choice, right? You could have chosen any of those paths, and there's nothing that determines which path you'll take except for your own free choice. Okay, so now why is this important? Because that's just one of your lives, right? You live many lives. This is just one of them. Okay, so now imagine you have other lives. So let's say that's one life. So now I'm going to draw a different diagram, and this diagram is going to represent not those individual micro choices like we have here. We're not going to represent all these choices. With this next diagram, I'm only going to draw the choices that represent each individual life that you could have lived. And there's many different ones you could have lived, but these are the ones that you actually lived. So in other words, if we go back to the point when you start off as a rat-like creature all the way up until now, this is still one life. You haven't finished it yet, right? So you don't finish this life until you either go out of existence, that is, you choose to cycle, and then that's where your unique personality will come back again and start all over, and as a rat-like creature, crow-like creature, whatever, of low intelligence, and evolve, and you'll make different choices that time. Some people ask, well, is that really me then? Well, yeah, it's your core personality, but if you don't remember the past cycle that you did, then, because you don't, when you come back, you don't remember your past cycle. You could eventually grow to remember it, and that's where we're going to go into the ultimate you. So anyway, let's say this represents one path, and then you cycled here. And for cycle, I'm going to do a little circle or a little half circle at the end. So this right here represents this life, let's say. And this is the end of this life. This is when you actually choose to cycle, because eventually you have to choose to cycle. I know that sounds crazy and scary, but once you understand, I think at the end of this video, by the time you understand this concept, this isn't going to be like that weird. Believe me, this bothered me for so long, but I've learned that to seek truth, to seek why we're here. So, okay, I'll answer that question really fast before I move on to show the ultimate self and why this idea isn't so scary. So how you choose to cycle is once you become advanced enough to where you're no longer in the cycle of reincarnation. So what happens is you evolve to a point where you're so advanced, you're so intelligent that there's literally no form on any planet throughout the entire universe that's capable of holding you. How do I explain that? Basically, once you reach that state of consciousness, if the universe tries to reincarnate you into another body, the most advanced body it can, you will immediately know, upon birth, you'll know who you are and just bounce out of it. Like, in other words, it can't hold you no more. There's no physical form, if you want to call it physical. There's no form in the universe, no avatar that can hold your consciousness anymore. At that point, you've escaped the cycle of reincarnation. Once you escape the cycle of reincarnation, not like floating in space, because you live in an actual place. That is, your mind will still experience what I call Namverse, and that's from the idea, the concept of Nam, which is a word I use for true self, which comes from Namaste, and that part of it means the truth. And so that's why I call it that, because that's like your true self. And so I thought it was a cool word to use to represent the true self, your true consciousness. And so you still experience a world, just like when you dream, you're experiencing a world. That's a real world that you're experiencing. And right now, this is a real world that you're experiencing. I mean, real in the sense that your senses are experiencing it, your consciousness is experiencing it, it's being projected into your consciousness, and you're processing it. It's like a holographic universe. But dream world is it has different rules and things like that. So that's why you can fly in dreams and so forth. Then there's the astral world, there's the ghost world. And then there's that world that exists in the second path I talk about, Namicism. If you want to learn more about that, I have an entire article written on. I mean, actually, I don't even know if I did this or not yet, but it's in the description. But just in case, let me do this really fast for you here. Sorry about that. There you go. On that site, I have a page dedicated strictly to that idea of the second path. Right. So let me go ahead and get back to this real quick. This is a really, really cool idea, and it's really scary at first. But I've learned not to base my feelings on what I want reality to be, but just accept what reality is. Because there's a lot of things about reality I don't like, but I can't. I'm not the kind of person that can just go, "Well, I'm just not going to. I'm just going to believe reality is different." And think about it. Um, is it just a coincidence that most people's belief happens to be something that they don't mind, or at least, or makes them very happy? That is, whatever they believe about the universe, the ultimate self and the ultimate reality of everything, just happens to make them feel good inside. What are the odds of that? What are the odds that everyone would find the truth that just happens to be something that jives with what they want to be true? And so I think that's impossible. So there should be uncomfortable things in our beliefs. And this idea used to be so uncomfortable to me until I finally really understood it. And it still is kind of uncomfortable to me, but it doesn't matter whether it's uncomfortable or not. So this line right here represents one life you chose to live. You started here, you reincarnated many, many times. You went through your evolutionary process. Somewhere in here or so, you stopped your reincarnation process, and now you just started living life within the nomverse, within your consciousness. And there is actually really cool because you have, I don't want to get sidetracked, but when you're there, you have a thing called a reality machine. That's what I call it because it makes the most sense. Anything that you can imagine, you can program it to make you have that experience. So if you want to know what it feels like to be Superman, saving Metropolis for 1,000 years, you can program that into your reality machine. Whatever you can imagine being and understand it how it works, you can make it exist there, and then it'll actually convince you. And you can set what level of awareness you want. So you can say, I want some awareness of who I am, or you can say I want no awareness of who I am. If you say I want no awareness of who I am, you will actually be Superman, and you will think you're Superman until the simulation ends. So for 1,000 years, you'll be saving Lois and think you're Superman, and then the simulation ends. You're like, that was weird. I really thought I was Superman. And then you go to another experience. And what happens, the kind of cycle is that the more experiences you have, the more it grows or expands your imagination. The more you expand your imagination, the more experiences you can imagine. You can see how that's a never-ending thing. It grows outward, right? So you start out with this like little bit of information, like that, and then you expand into more imagination. That more imagination. I'm going to show you this in just a second. Expands to more, and then more. I'll just show this really quickly. So it's kind of like this. So you start off as this very tiny idea. That white circle, that represents how much imagination power you have. And then that allows you to imagine all these new experiences. That's the next dark area. And then after you experience all those experiences, it expands your imagination. As you expand your imagination, you're able to imagine more experiences. After you experience all those experiences, you're able to have a bigger imagination. And you see it keeps growing bigger and bigger and bigger. So going down this timeline here, eventually you reach that point and you have all these awesome experiences until the point you've experienced everything there is to possibly experience. Now, how do you find the ultimate self? Now, this is where it gets complicated. And I hope I can explain this right. So going from here to here, this was one lifetime. That is not one lifetime as in on Earth or on another planet, but your entire existence. All your reincarnations to the point where you cycled, poof, became nothing, so to speak, and then eventually you'll come back as your core self. And I'm gonna explain what the core personality is, and it's all part of the same process. I'm gonna draw a few more of these lines so you kind of get an idea what I'm talking about. And I'll make it simple. So I can make this really complex. I'm gonna make it simple. Now you have to actually go through a lot more lifetimes than this. That is cycling, like each one of these lines represents an entire reincarnation process until you eventually cycle, and then you start back over from the beginning. Now, after a while, after you live enough of these different lifetimes and you cycle, and by lifetimes I mean like all your reincarnations up until the point you become super being, and then you choose to cycle. Or the universe you happen to be in collapses on itself, in which no conscious can survive that, and then you automatically just recycle. Which is why I want to find the answer to how to escape this universe. Anyway, so this is a lifetime where you actually figure out how to escape the universe, let's say, and so you're able to live a lot longer. Now, eventually, what happens is you reach a point of saturation. That is, when you live long enough and you've escaped reincarnation, you've lived and you expand your consciousness to such a great degree that there's really nothing left to imagine. This is probably Google plexes from now. After you've lived like Google plexes of years, that's an impossible number to imagine. It might as well have been an eternity, but you've lived so long that you're comfortable with cycling. You've done everything you can possibly imagine. You know what? I want to do that all over again. I want to refine my true self all over again. And so you choose to cycle that point. You have to, because that's how eternity works. It has to cycle. You can't have an infinite regress. Otherwise, if you could just keep going on forever and ever, you can always ask me, well, who was the first soul to ever do that? Who was the first soul to finally find this path, escape, and then continue to live on forever? And if this has been happening forever, you'd say, well, why did that happen before it happened? And that's where you get into infinite regress, and it's a problem. So there's a whole bunch. Imagine a bunch more of these lines, right? Like Google plexes of these lines. These are all different lifetimes or existences you could have had, where each of them have their own passive reincarnations that you chose, and there's all these different possible branches of different lives that you could went down. And all those branches exist in the eternal information. So every choice you could ever make in every possible lifetime and every possible life path, every reincarnation path you could have taken, all those choices exist already in this sea of information, and you can actually have access to that. And this is where this is the true self. So first off, what I call God, it is constantly interfacing with that. It's a dynamic information interfacing with that static information. So it's able to see your entire possible sea of information of every choice you can possibly make. You don't actually exist in those places, but the information of those choices exist. And so if it takes that entire idea, and this is a simplification. Just imagine that this is huge, that this has so many possible branches. That entire possible choices that you could make, you only made some of them, right? Every time you only make some of the choices. Every time you live, like this is only one path you chose that time and then recycled, or cycled, and then you came here and cycled. You came here and cycled. But every one of those branches, the information of those choices exist. That's what God bases your core personality on. That is, every possible choice that you could ever make, that's what creates your core personality. And that's why there's a finite amount of core personalities. There's not an infinite amount of people. There's only a finite amount of people, and they continue to cycle over and over and over again, each time doing all over again. Now, sometimes you don't make it to your ultimate self. Sometimes you only make it to here. Now, in this representation, I'm going to draw one more line, which represents the point here, and then the ultimate self. So let's say this time you go down like this, and you cycle. You never got to find your ultimate self here. Matter of fact, you never even escaped reincarnation. The universe collapsed on you before you can figure out how to escape it, and then you just automatically were forced to recycle, or just cycle. Sorry. And each time you do that, here you actually, and let's say this is the point where that line right there, that's the point where you actually remember or you escape reincarnation. So this life, or this particular existence, I should say, this existence, all your reincarnations, you managed to escape reincarnation, but you didn't manage to escape the universe before it collapsed and you're recycled, and so forth. Now, how do you find the ultimate self? This is where you find the ultimate self, this line right here. So let me go ahead and draw a line here. So that line right there is where you find the ultimate self. That's where ultimate self lies within. Why? Once you reach this state, you're able to look into the information. You're so advanced, you can look into all your possible lives. Well, I shouldn't say lives, all your possible existences. You're able to see this existence where you only lived a short time before you cycled. You're able to see this existence, this existence. You're able to see all the choices that you could ever make. Now, you didn't make all those choices in this life, right? You only made this choice. These are all the reincarnations you chose in this life. That's the path you chose. You're here right now. Once you're here, you start to relive these paths through your reality machine, boom, boom, boom. And as you relive all your other possible paths, you gain every bit of information that is contained that makes your core personality. I know this is kind of a deep concept. I hope this is making sense. If you have any questions, please let me know if you're still here. I can't tell who's here or not in this thing. For some reason, it doesn't show me. But if you have any questions, please let me know. And hopefully my microphone's coming through loud enough. So basically, what you do once you reach that state of ultimate existence, you start to relive and search all the possible paths you could have taken before up to that point. And so as you're reliving and going and like through your reality machine, you're actually reliving each one of those other paths you could have taken, that other existence you could have had if you would have chosen those paths of reincarnation. Now, this takes a long time to relive all those in your reality machine. But eventually what happens is, as you continue on this path here and upward, where you're re-experiencing not just your past possible existences, but also fantasy existences, because it's fun. So you're like, I want to know what it's like to be Superman. I want to know what it's like to be this kind of creature, whatever. I want to know what it's like to be this thing again. And so you do that as well. But as you're doing that, you're also coming back and you're choosing to relive different existences. Now, after you've chosen to relive all your existences, in which case you do in kind of a fast forward way because you just want the information as fast as you can get it. And you don't want to be truly convinced you're there. You just want the experience. You want the knowledge, because it's that knowledge that makes you you. What makes you you? And this is where I should have started out first. It's your memories that make you you. If I erased your brain, you would just go back to your core personality, right? And that is just this life. So as a human consciousness, if I were to erase all your human memory, you would still be you in a way. Like you'd have some core personality that kind of seems like you, but you'd be a different person. And evidence for that is people that suffered amnesia. So when they suffer amnesia, a lot of times people say that people that have known them for a long time say they're not the same person anymore. They're just not, because your memory makes up a big part of you. The experiences that you experience, every experience you have, forms who you are as a person. Sorry about that. It forms who you are as a person. And so all those experiences form your ultimate person, your core personality, your ultimate self. So all these different branches of existences with different reincarnations where you cycled here, cycled here, cycled here, cycled here. Once you remember all this, then that you've remembered your core personality. That is the ultimate awakening. So the first awakening is remembering that, hey, there's a second path, and finding that second path and how to get there. And that's awesome. And you think, oh, that's the end. I just live like this forever, until you remember this. You get to the point where you remember this and you're like, wait a minute. You see the information, you see that there's other possible paths you could have made. And it's only after you gain all that knowledge of every possible other path you have taken before, since this has been happening for eternity, you've taken these other paths before. And so once you remember all the possible paths that you could take, you gain your true memory, the memory of everything that your core personality is based on. At that point, you become the ultimate self. All right, so somewhere way up here outside of all this, you become the ultimate self. And that's when that's the only time in your existence where you are the exact same person every time you reach it. What I mean by that is, okay, when you live this existence and choose all these different reincarnation paths, right? And you get to here. Once you get to here, that's just one personality type. Like, yeah, it's still the core you still shines through, because that's what you're based on, is all this information, but all your choices you could possibly make. But when you get here, you're a different person than when you're here, right? This existence, because of your experiences that you remember, you're a slightly different person here than you are here. And because your overall experiences, make you who you are. Like right now, let's say you would have chosen a different path altogether. And the path you chose in this life, let's say you became, I don't know, like I became an artist and philosopher and stuff. But let's say I lived a different life and I became a military man. Well, that military experience would really change who I am as a person. After going through boot camp and going through military and maybe going to war and having to kill people, that would change me on a fundamental level. I'd be a slightly different person than who I am now. Like I just want to be the same person because I'd had different experiences, different memories that are making me who I am. And so the person I am here is not the same person as I am when I'm here. So this existence is different than this one, different this one, different this one. But the only time in my existence where I'm always exactly the same is right here, when I remember all of this. So when I remember all the information that God creates my core personality from, it's only at that point that I am the same every single time. I hope that makes sense. That is, every time you reach that point of enlightenment, the ultimate enlightenment, where you remembered everything that molds you into who you are, every experience that you could have lived, you remember it now because you actually experienced it. At that point, you were always the exact same personality, the exact same person. There's nothing different because you have the identical, 100% identical experiences behind you. And so once you reach that point, you're always the same person. Now, from that point onward, there are two possibilities. One, you either just extend on for forever, if that's a possibility. I think it's a logical impossibility. Doesn't make sense logically for me. And this bothers me because I would like that to be true. I would like it to be true that I just, from that point on, extend on forever, never, 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 never. But what I've remembered and understood is that that doesn't happen. You extend on for a long time until you choose that, hey, you know what? I've experienced everything I possibly can think of. I want to start back from here and see how long it takes me to get back to here. Every time you get back to here, you're happy. Now, when you get to here, you're still happy, right? So you chose to reincarnate, or the universe cycled you, and that sucks when that happens because it's not your choice. And that's the one thing about my belief I absolutely hate. That is, if we don't figure out how to escape our expanding universe that we're in right now, although it's kind of like a simulation, like a holographic universe, we are still mentally totally connected to it. And non-verse and everything is kind of like part of that experience. So if that universe expands and collapses on itself and we don't figure out how to way to escape it, to go to another universe that is not in a state of collapse, then what happens is nothing survives that. That cycles your core personality and you start all over again from the beginning, and you live a whole different life, maybe a whole different existence. Maybe this time you go down this path, or you start to go down this path, but then you branch off and go down this path. You live an entire different set of reincarnations. But eventually, you'll reach this point again to where you've escaped, and then you'll reach this point here where you've remembered everything that makes you you. So eventually, you'll always reach that state again. That's why it seems more comfortable to me. Like, I hate the idea of non-existence, but you're not. I mean, yeah, you are going into non-existence in a way, but your core personality is always existing. So yeah, you come back at the start all over. You don't remember any of your past existence until you reach that point. And it's only when you reach that point. So let me just check one more thing. Okay, let's say this is the path you're on right now. Let's say you're somewhere right about here. This is where you're at right now on your path of reincarnations. You're a human right now. You have a bunch of lives to live. And then you get to here, the universe collapses, you don't figure out how to escape, and you recycle again. When you come back here and you start going down this path, you don't remember any of this. Like, that existence, you don't remember it. Now, sometimes the existences cross paths. There's some experiences that will cross over each other. So you might have the same experience, but because the paths kind of cross every now and again. But you're not going to remember that other existence. So it's as if you're a different person. But again, you're still the same core personality, because the core personality is based on all these experiences. But eventually you will reach this point where you remember everything. And at that point, you become the ultimate self. And the ultimate self is always exactly the same. At that point, you go, oh man, what a trip. That took me a long time to finally reach my true self again, my ultimate self. You might go, that took me like, a Google or 3 or 5 Googles to get here. That's crazy. That's a long time, by the way. 5 Googles. It's crazy amount of time. And so that took a long time to get there, but eventually you get there again. You're like, that was kind of fun. That was an interesting experience. Like all those times I chose to cycle, not knowing that this true ultimate self existed. Because you wouldn't cycle if you knew this. If you knew this information for sure, you would not choose to cycle unless you went insane. That is, the suffering became too much. You went insane. You're powerful enough now. You can choose to just let go of yourself and start over again. That happens to some people. The other option is that, you just don't find the answer. You're so close to finding the answer, but then the universe, collapses and you start over again. So yeah, that idea bothers me so much. The idea of the universe collapsing and being forced to cycle. It's not my choice. That sucks. But I have to accept what is. And that's what I've learned. I've learned to just accept what is and not try to force reality to be what I want it to be. Because if I do that, I'm just make believing. I'm doing what everyone else in the world, just about, not everyone, but most people in the world do this. They just make believe stuff that makes sense to them. They're like, you know what, this is what makes sense to me, so that's what I'm going to choose to believe. And they might not even know they're doing it. But if you really think about your belief system and go, hey, is there anything in my view about the world that bothers me? And if there's really nothing that really bothers you about how the world works and how the entire system works, there's a good chance that you probably don't have it right yet. And I probably don't have it totally right yet. I know that. I mean, that's fine. I hope I'm on the right path. And and what I have remembered has made perfect sense. And what I have remembered about like other planets and things like that I've been on, and the technologies there have actually carried over here. That is, 15 years ago, I was talking about technology on other planets that I remember that are now coming about on Earth that no one foresaw happening. And I was like, whoa, that's trippy. I remember talking about some very similar type of thing happening, or events and things like that. Okay, so that's pretty much the idea, I guess. I hope I explained it right. I think as far as philosophy goes, I think it's a pretty complex idea, and I think it really takes some thinking and mulling over the basic concepts. But I think it's so much more complicated than this, but I've just kind of smashed it down into a way that is simple. It's like the concept, like, those books for dummies. It's kind of like that. So it's not the true concept. It can be, it can be explained, and there's so much more depth to it. But I've kind of just simplified it down to a point I think it's understandable to most people, and most people can go, oh, that's interesting. But then it really just takes meditating. It takes really searching yourself, looking at it, and see if it's true for you. I don't believe in something's true for one person on another, but what I mean by that is where you're at now. Everyone is where they need to be right now. So whatever you believe, that's where you need to be right now. But through meditation and stuff, and I have a guided meditation video, if you haven't seen it, on my website, that really helps awaken self. It's a really different kind of meditation that I've remembered ever since I was 11. I just woke up one day and knew how to do it, and I've been doing it ever since. I'm now 40 years old, so that's a long time, I think, to be meditating. I had my awakening when I was about 25. But anyway, if you have any questions, I can't tell who's here, who's not here. It doesn't show me on this new streaming thing. It's different. This is the first time I've ever tried it, and I'm trying to see if it shows me. Oh, I can kind of go like that. And I think that's it. So I think, oh, okay, there you go. Pop out chat, participants. Okay, cool. So it looks like, okay, sorry, it looks like you're already gone. Okay, cool. So that's it. That's the whole concept. Hey, if anyone has any questions, feel free to contact me on Namicism.com. I should probably look at the camera. Anyway, feel free to contact me on Namicism.com if you have any questions about this concept, and I can try to make it more understandable. I do want to write an article about it as well. It's so complicated. Like, the article would have to have diagrams in, I think, and I think even in video form, it's hard to explain in a way that will be comprehensible. And then there's all that other information that's necessary that I went through in the beginning of the video that's necessary to understand this. Because if you don't understand how I understand reincarnation to work, then none of this is going to make sense. Or how I understand, the cycling process to work, then none of that will make sense. So there's a lot of underlining information that has to be understood in order to understand this concept. It's basically like pre-Westcott knowledge. If you want to understand Einstein's special relativity, well, you have to learn a bunch of other stuff first. Otherwise, it's not going to truly make sense. At least on a mathematical level, it's not going to make sense. All right. Thank you for watching. Namaste, everybody. And again, if you have any questions, feel free to ask them to me. Also, I'm going to put a link, if it's not already there. It should be there in the description of the video. So check out the description of my video, and there should be a link to my Facebook, my Namicism Facebook page. I have like 18,000 followers or something like that. Go there, and you can also write me a question there if you want to. And a question about anything. If you just have a question about anything, about the world, I have a lot of information that I've gained from my awakening about the world, how it works, from everything, the theory of everything. And that's also on the site as well. But if you have any questions about anything at all, or things I've talked about before, or things I've written about, and you just want some more clarification, or you just want to ask me a question about anything at all, feel free to ask me a question on the Namicism page. The reason why I wanted you to do it there, not private, if you want to do it private, that's fine. But if you would, please do it in public so that other people can benefit from the answer. That is, other people might have your same question but are too afraid to ask whatever. And then if I answer it, then they can see that answer. So other people can benefit from the answer, basically. All right. So again, namaste. Until next time. Basically, for those that know what namaste is, just a Sanskrit term originally, now used in Hindi among Hindus and stuff. Not that I'm a Hindu, but it just means may the in this universe. Okay. Until next time. All right. Bye.